Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Power Is Now TV. This is part two of my interview with Ray Carlisle. He is the president of the National Association of Real Estate Brokers NID division, and he's also the president and co-founder of the NID Housing Counseling Agency. Ray has really taken us on a journey and really explored a lot about what NID is all about, as well as the NAREP, the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, and the fight that continues to protect home ownership for everybody, to make it a right, if you will, for everyone to buy what they want to buy, live where they want to live. So we're transitioning now to the Fair Housing Act itself. And again, Ray, thank you so much for joining me today and being a part of the discussion. So the 1968 Fair Housing Act was a game changer for our community and for everyone. Can you share with us your thoughts on the Fair Housing Act and whether or not it's still important today?
The last part of your question is what I'll respond to first. Yes, you need a fair housing law today, and you need a strengthened fair housing law. There have been many local laws and regulations that have watered down the 68 Fair Housing Law at the state level. It's a federal law, but you can implement local restricting regulations that restrict some the effectiveness of those of the fair housing law in those certain districts, if you will. And so now what the Fair Housing Act created, we have to, when you opened up this discussion, you said it was, pushed into law, and it was pushed into law, signed by President Johnson after the assassination of Martin Luther King. It was a reaction. Why did it take the brutal murder of a world icon, the burning of communities of color, core cities? Why did it take that to pass a fair housing law? That should tell us a lot. Why had there been so much opposition to something that is embedded in the founding documents of our Constitution? Property ownership. And so when you think about that, is that the fair housing law is going to always be opposed because it talks about building wealth, securing your family, having presence and stability in your community, having political influence, which means political power to shape policies, having the ability to have better schools and have more control over the schools for your children. And so the Fair Housing Act was put a false Band-Aid on a cancer with no intention of those regulations to actually come into full effect. And that has been experienced year after year by the major trade associations, by the banks, the businesses, by the individual real estate professionals. And people want to say, well, the realtors did it. Yes, they were the organizing group behind opposing fair housing, just like anti-busing. Now, we know our schools go the path of our communities. When you pay in taxes to your public school district, which is usually the second largest budget of any municipality, and your children are relocated to schools that are 3 to 5 years behind their peer schools in their peer group, why would anybody allow that? Why would the people who were getting the benefit of that allow it? Why would you waste money educating people that you're going to keep your knee on their neck, if you will? Why would you spend the money to do that? So you have to go back to the culture and conscience of the founding of this country. The battle, the anti-slavery battle. Why did it got so toxic that several states decided they had to succeed from the Union? They had to break up this Union. They say, love it or leave it. Well, you left it.
Wow, you're right.
Based on money and power. And so when you ask, do we still need the fair housing law? We need it strengthened, but we need strategic collective action to make it come alive. The law that's there, what do we do to make it come alive? One of the things you don't do, and what NID would never do, is to take money to be quiet. If you offer us money to be quiet, we're going to expose you. You got to have that level of integrity, because then you will be invited to the table. Pastor Fraser, you can understand this. Because you're invited to the table, always know that there may be a knife to your throat. And so don't feel like that I'm in now. No. You come with a plan of advocacy that is not as confrontational as I may seem now. But you use your personality, but stick to your purpose. Your purpose is to strengthen your community, your business, and your family. And I put it in that order, because you're not going to have the vibrant family that we all wish for if it doesn't have a vibrant community to flourish in, a supporting community. Mm-hmm. Your family is not going to be as independent as you'd like them to be if they didn't have the opportunity to start and run a successful business. And so when we talk about the Fair Housing Law, it's a lot broader. Don't forget, we can pass the Civil Rights Act. We can pass the Voting Rights Act, but we couldn't touch that fair housing until they murdered Dr. Martin Luther King and we started burning down these cities. And I am not advocating for violence or burning down those cities or nothing, but I want you to realize, don't get yourself put into that box where that's all that's left. We don't have to do that. So yes, Eric, we need the fair housing law. We need to strengthen. We need to come together with an economic development policy, a fair housing policy that creates economic development. There's no, it wasn't, we had this debate when HUD was founded. Don't forget, they separated the Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity. You had HUD, had FHA. Now you got a deputy secretary for the Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity. Now you asked yourself over the years, what has that office created under that mandate?
Zero, nothing.
Yeah.
You know, Ray, you make some very powerful points, and when you painted the picture for us as to the context in which the Fair Housing Law was put into law. And then we look back now 54 years and we see that nothing has really changed in terms of the rate of homeownership, especially for minorities. And that discrimination, I mean, it wasn't just a few years ago where attorney generals are suing banks across the country for redlining. And so these problems still exist. And now I know why. I mean, the law was never intended, as you are alluding to have any real enforcement power. It was just a Band-Aid to keep us quiet.
Yeah. And we were willing victims.
It's something to really think about, Ray. And it's, man, as I reflect on all of this, it really does make sense. And it kind of angers me because, what is the government doing? What are our politicians doing? What is the Black Caucus doing in Washington or in the local states doing to further strengthen this law? Because people are still being victimized by racism and by unconscious bias, not, staring and everything that you can imagine, all the new tricks that are undercover that cannot be open and notorious like they were in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. These things are all at play now. Let me ask you, have you ever been a victim of discrimination as it relates to housing in your lifetime so far?
Of course, I had a single mother. And so I saw the discrimination that she had to go through, because she purchased 3 homes on as a single woman before the 1968 fair housing law. And so she's enterprising, hard working. And but she knew that she had to have a roof for her sons that nobody could put her out of. And it would be a safe haven for them so that they wouldn't fall victim to the streets. And it was a status symbol that I soon learned, that it also created envy, because you had Black men, you had, couples, married couples, Black, they were renting their homes. They couldn't own them. And quite frankly, we thought everybody owned their home. And what you learn is that we go back to starting your own business. Black man has a job, he works hard, but he's going to get paid less than his white counterpart. So he's going to be able to produce less for his family.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of demoralizing aspect. Then you see this woman comes along and she can seem to do more than you. But yeah, she was a nurse, she was trained. And so, these frustrations that we have in society, and it's not just Blacks in America, it's in caste systems, as been written in these are just some wonderful books have been written recently, and by Black authors, and some whites. But you go back to the 1619 Project, and all these, it's just a whole bunch of knowledge. I appreciate you the kind of remarks you make about my statements. The data is out there, and Blacks are talking about it, writing about it every day. We're not listening. And so I would say, when we look at the challenges that we've had to overcome, the expectations to just being a normal person are actually unrealistic. Wow, how do you deal with that? And so when you see someone like yourself, Eric, like other people I'm talking about, that seem to succeed in that environment, the first thing that evolves is envy, a natural reaction. Why not me? Mm-hmm. And envy could be a good thing. And in most cases, it should be a good thing, because it should be a motivating factor.
Right.
How can I learn how to do that?
Mm-hmm.
But then when you get yourself locked down into this feeling of why not me, like, what is your responsibility to that? Why not me? Mm-hmm. Then that goes into jealousy. Now, jealousy could have its positive motivating factors, but it can also be really corrosive. And as and we know that the corrosiveness, how corrosive jealousy can be. Mm-hmm. But the final thing is, when that jealousy doesn't get mitigated, it evolves into hate.
Mm.
And then you develop the self-hate syndrome. So you start hating everything you see that's black because you're black.
Mm.
And so, I say that we have actual control over those dilemmas, those challenges, and those that would ask why. I would have to, we're some of the most religious people on earth. I would ask, why do you go to church? What do you get from it? You already have it. You're just allowing yourself to recognize it.
Ray, you're blowing me away here with your insight, and uh, the envy leading to jealousy, leading to hate, leading to self-hate, because there are those within our community, in spite of open and notorious discrimination and redlining and every other stumbling block that could be put in their way, they find a way to win anyhow. You must be very, very proud of the example your mother, a single African-American woman, set for you and your brothers. Tell me about your family. How many brothers and sisters did you have? And your mother seems like she was a superhero to you.
Well, she was, and I don't get too much in my family, so I'm gonna keep it short. And that is, it goes back to my ancestors. My aunt, who passed at 104 about 10 years ago, I still have an aunt, her younger sister that's 112, the oldest living person in Texas. One of the proudest moments of my life, about this 10 years ago, before she passed away, she was sitting there at the kitchen table in Houston. And she looked at me and she said, "Boy, you remind me of my grandpa Douglas." Now, she was born in 1902.
Wow.
And so I knew her father, my grandfather, my great grandfather.
Right.
And when she told me, I reminded her of her dad's father. That was one of the proudest moments in my life. He was born a slave. And he was able to grow this family from that point. So it's our genes. It's not me. It's what I owe to the genes that God has blessed me with.
Mm-hmm.
Period. And so, when somebody tells you something like that, and I know he was a courageous man, and he's got a whole story of his own that's absolutely fantastic. But that you pay honor to the struggle that those people had to go through.
Yes.
And in their genes, they want you to understand their pain in their struggle.
Right.
And appreciate the fact that they were around to raise you. And then that's your obligation, to be around to raise your kids, your grandkids, your great grandkids, and along with that, your fellow man and community.
Community is everything, right? And the church, homeownership, relationships coming together, supporting one another, not being so envious of one another that we hate one another, but coming together. And we rely on each other to be able to do things, to achieve things. So we rely on each other for the information, sharing information and opportunity. When I look at NARAP and the work they've done now, 70 something years in existence, they are doing just that, sharing information, empowering real estate professionals to not only take advantage of opportunities for themselves and their families, but to help others achieve the American dream of home ownership. Yet there is that segment in society, in our profession, that are, bringing their bias, their unconscious bias, or in many cases conscious bias, against African Americans, people of color, or different orientations, and they are staring them, or they're just flat out not working with them, denying them opportunity to find a home.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that the discrimination and the racism that's involved with real estate professional, is that still a problem, or has the Fair Housing Act been able to, say, deter a lot of that activity?
That's a great question. I'll say this: money drives decisions in most cases. That's the base factor, and how people act, and wanting to be accepted into certain, let's say, streams that would afford you more business opportunities, like Blacks joining the realtors and being subjugated to discrimination, which they always talk about, that they feel in there, but they learn things, and so they're over there to learn things so they can make more money. Okay, that's good. And that's the power of NARAB. The realtors will tell you that they can't teach their agents what NARAB teaches the people that they engage with, because we teach them, the leaders over there. And so NARAB, like I said before we opened this up, it is a extension of our community and our churches. That's what it is. And so you come to NARAB and you come to love the organization, because guess what? It's in your DNA. It goes back so long. Sometimes you want to depart from it, but you wouldn't come around, you wouldn't pay double dues. You pay dues to the realtors, pay dues to NARAB. You wouldn't get involved in an association that sometimes the politics are so tough, not recognizing that if you ever got into the higher levels of the politics of these other organizations, it's just as tough. Right. But you wouldn't be paying those double dues unless you were getting something awfully valuable.
Right.
We have to be able to share that value, because see, that value that you're getting, you can monetize it. That's what we do over at NID. It's your equity. It's your place of being, your place of pride. And so, some of the things, you take the good with the bad. I know one bishop told me of a church, he said, I wish I could appoint all the trustee boards of all the churches under me. That's not going to happen. See? So, because when the pastor got so powerful, he wanted to keep the control that he felt like he needed. It was like everything that was about the church was inside the church's walls, and that is not the purpose of the church. Mm-hmm. And I'm making that analogy because that's NARAB. You get power, you say, this is a good thing. I don't want nobody else in there but me until I get mine. You can't do that.
Right.
You gotta invite disparate voices and opinions, but you don't have to tolerate foolishness. You don't have to tolerate disrespect of the organization or its mission. But it is an organization, like all organizations, it has its political, let's say, let me say it like this. It offers leaders tremendous opportunity, and people are going to compete to the death for that opportunity in most cases. And that's where we lose our best talent, because like my mother used to say to me, when God made good brains, he didn't stop with you. She kept me in my place.
The Newsday article really showed a lot of real estate agents steering and just not really serving African Americans and people of color. Mm-hmm. It really brought to the forefront, that racism and discrimination is alive and well in the real estate community. Um, as a result of the formation of NARAP, we see that ARIA and NAREP and all these other organizations have come to fruition to serve their respective communities because the underlying root cause of the lack of homeownership is access to credit, access to information, access to real estate professionals that can truly assist them in becoming homeowners. What can we do to really change the hearts and minds of all real estate professionals out there who are selling real estate to not discriminate and to truly treat everyone the same?
Well, I think that we ask too much of the real estate community when we ask that, because those are society and historic biases, the cultural biases. And so, I think understanding that, people come from their own cultures. They didn't make themselves. They develop bad practices, yeah, and foolish ideals, yeah. And so it's a competition, Eric. People are competing for their place in the sun. And when it appears that like they call the Asians the model minority, that's insulting to them. Like they don't have any problems. They just acquiesce to everything. And so blah, blah, blah. But, the number one minority that has been highlighted over these centuries have been the African, particularly the African that was enslaved in America. Probably the most aggrieved minority, well, not probably, but actually the most aggrieved minority is the Indian. American Indian was here. And, we look at what's happening. Well, I don't want to make an analogy with Ukraine, but when countries invade countries and unjustly take their land, it's been happening throughout the world. That's how England and Spain, and France, and Portugal developed their colonies. What were those colonies predominant? Continent of Africa, the Caribbean, and South America, people of color. And so we look at those cultural pressures, and then out of all of that emerges this group of former slaves and a minute number of free Blacks that have advocated and fought to the death for the basic human rights. That struggle is advanced every day. We have to go through stuff. The other minorities admire that. And the fact that we still have the ability to be welcoming to others. Because, when you say, how can we bring them all together? First of all, you have to realize there's not many people reaching out to Blacks. They're just not. The other groups don't reach out to Blacks. They'll patronize you. They'll write on your victories. And they'll claim, when all these laws started, we started adding women and all the rest of the stuff. All these rights, 1866, it was about Africans. And everybody says, why them? Why not me? Okay. And then we are expected to lobby harder for them than we do for ourselves. And if we don't, we're racist ourselves. And so, like my daughter likes to say, and she says this on her calls because she runs NID, my daughters. And I'm unapologetically Black. And she likes saying that. Because she didn't know what it meant until she got involved with NARAP and NID, even though she grew up in it. She just knew she was going to the convention with Dad. But once they got to be active and saw the mistreatment and unfair treatment, because they never had to experience it in their lives because of our economic position in our community. That's what I'm saying. She did not know other peers that grew up in a single parent household. That's almost impossible to realize.
Right, right.
And so I say that community is there for us. And I'm just so surprised because I just started learning this last 10 years from my kids. I'm really proud of me and my wife for being able to create that.
Right.
And so I don't think that I'm blinded, and I don't think that it's foolhardily to think that we can create it again. And once we do, those other groups, they will have less to find reason to disrespect us, less to come up with excuses why they can't work with us. And I'll close out this understanding, my understanding with this, is that all of Mexico was from, what a Mexican-California border is now, all up to Canada. That was all Mexico. The the Mexican-American War, dude, America invaded and took that land from the Mexicans. They took it. That was an invasion. But we called it the Mexican-American War. What did the Mexicans do to us? Do to America? They just said, hey, this is my land, get off of it. The Mexicans say, shit, no, I took it, it's mine now. Just say, And so we went into a war. And so, and Eric, don't let it fall deaf on your psychology of the day when you start talking about the 68 Fair Housing Act. Haiti was the first, if not the only, former slave colony that freed itself. It freed itself. And then it fought in the American Revolutionary War on the side of the Union. It fought the French, got them out of, it was too expensive for them to stay in Louisiana, which allowed America to buy the Louisiana Purchase pennies on the dime. Leader of Haiti and his army. Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, not by their own design, but by the policies of not wanting. It's too dangerous to those who are afraid. It's too dangerous to recognize these people as the independent, strong, and very, very valuable people that they really are, particularly when you've lived 100 years prior to that, or whenever it was, putting in your constitution that they were 4/5 of a person. They weren't even a human being. And so, when you ask these are difficult questions, and people can get philosophical about them. Why this, and what can we do? You cannot change your ancestry. You are an African. You ain't changing that.
Mm-hmm.
How does the world feel about the African? How does the African feel about himself, wherever he finds himself today?
Ray, I really appreciate your time, and I want to end this segment and getting your final thoughts on the 1968 Fair Housing Act, and what can we do to make it more of a deterrent to discrimination, and just your final thoughts in general about fair housing.
Okay, well, thanks for this opportunity to rant, Eric. And like I say, I don't particularly like doing these things, but been watching you for 12, 13 years, you're dedicated to what you're doing. And so I'm talking all this crap, I gotta share it. And so, and not be one of those that just, I don't accuse you of anything. I admire your efforts and how you stuck to it, because you went through some really tough times and you stuck with it. And it's always with grace and with pride. And that's when I talk about the African, that's what I see in you. Grace and pride, period. And we need that advocacy that you, and it's an advocacy of bringing people together. I understand that, and so, but you have no illusion to who you are and who you are not. And that's why you want to focus on this fair housing thing. So how can we make it better? Because you're talking about, let's deal with the reality of the day. What can we do today to make it better, to make it a reality? And I'll say this. First of all, the Biden administration is setting the groundwork in a lot of ways to make that happen. And we need to come together and pay more attention to that. Susan Rice, as a domestic policy advisor, is a strong part of that. So is Marcia Fudge, Secretary of HUD. But there are a lot of other names that I won't mention now, other than Lydia Pope, the president of NARAB now. She's been doing a fantastic job in getting the right message out there and being very strong in how she feels about neighborhood, how she feels about discrimination in housing, and how important the Fair Housing Act is to NARAB and to her personally from personal experiences. And so I say the Fair Housing Act is tremendously important in how it is going to be effective. If we have those people in place, a president and a vice president that's sensitive to it, but we don't ask them to carry all the water. We figure out what we have to do to what, like we talked about, what NID and NARAB has done to demonstrate why it makes sense. What are we going to do to demonstrate how it makes sense? Now, what we have the enforcement powers in HUD. The Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity is actually supposed to enforce the Fair Housing Act. Nobody seems to want to pay attention to that. Force it to. Be advocates. What are you doing? And if you're not vigorously enforcing the Fair Housing Act, you don't need to be funded. It's as simple as that. Show us what you are achieving. Well, I can't do this, but the secretary, I don't want to hear that. This is your job. You got a separate department, you got a separate budget. Ask the Financial Services Committee and Maxine Waters, cut their funding. Don't approve their budget. Ask Barbara Lee, who's on appropriations and administration and appropriations. We got friends in the right places. That's what I'm saying. So you answer these questions or cut your funding. And I'll shut it down with this. You get the Justice Department involved. The Justice Department see the enforcement of our federal laws through their network of the United States attorneys. Tremendous power. The Justice Department working with HUD. We had an ad hoc committee like this, and I was on it in the 90s. Bill Clinton put some window dressing on it. People talk about him a lot, but Bill was a politician before he was anything, period. When you start talking about an advocate, he was a politician. And I'm saying the rest aren't politicians. But I'm gonna tell you, I have more faith in Joe Biden, not just because of his appointment of Brown Jackson. I actually worked on his first campaign in 86, 87 when he ran for president. And he's a humble, decent guy, blue collar guy, and that's just it. And so, and we look at our child of Oakland here. Her and my daughter were born in the same hospital a month apart here in Oakland. And I know her advocate. As a prosecutor, she's tough. She can give some good guidance. Susan Rice, nobody can question that sister's commitment to getting it right and not being afraid of anything. Now, you see, I haven't mentioned one man yet, huh?
No, you haven't.
Okay. But Joe Biden, not one.
But Joe, yeah.
Yeah, and so the point that I'm making, it's a lineage, and then Marcia Fudge, of course, it's a lineage, and then we got our friend over at the Federal Housing Finance Agency, and we got our friend over at Jenny Mae, which is a separate part of HUD, even though it's other HUD. And so, we got people everywhere. We got relatives that work for them. We have helped raise them up in their positions. I was glad to see Mignon Moore there when Brown Jackson was being sworn in, and President Biden mentioned Jesse Jackson and just say, you know what I mean, Jesse? That meant a lot to me because Jesse is failing now in health.
Right.
But Mignon was his chief of staff when he was running for president. And me and her worked together like heck. Our offices were down the street from each other in DC. And she's back in the White House. I know you got a strong, good sister there. I'm telling you, if Black men get behind Black women in their leadership, strengthen them in their leadership, help them, be the advocates for them, be mentors to them without an expectation of them following what we say, because we ain't the boss.
Right.
We're partners. You can get the Justice Department and the Office of Fair Housing under the budget authority of several committees, and that includes Elizabeth Warren on the Senate side. You could get some real things done. And so, yeah, we can get more enforcement in it. We can make it more real because we haven't tied CRA to it. We haven't tied the 74 Civil Rights Act into it, the Community Development Act, the Stuart B. McKinney Homeless Act. All of these things have those provisions of enforcement in them. And if we wanted to dig down, we can be proud of ourselves about what we can make happen.
Thank you again, Ray Carlisle, for participating in our 1968 Fair Housing conversation right here on the Power is Now TV. I want to encourage those of you who are watching to please share the information with your friends and family members. Like us on all the social media platforms. Watch us on Apple TV, Roku, Fire TV, and please download our mobile app at Power is Now TV. Ray Carlisle is an icon in our community. He's been fighting the good fight for many years. We appreciate his contribution to the conversation about fair housing. Remember, we are at our best and we maximize our success when we act now. We need fair housing now, and everyone should be on board to do whatever you can to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to buy a home wherever they want to live and to achieve the American dream. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful day.